Honey? Ray?
Art, you had a dream you were going to win the lottery. You blew $500.
Oh, I can't believe you're still bringing that
I
up.
had a dream a plane was going to crash, so you took the bus to Las Vegas.
If I'd have been on the plane, it would have crashed. And it doesn't matter. This wasn't a dream. This was a vision. I'm telling you, these people are Satanists. As I sit here, they are Satanists. Look, the world is full of these kind of things. Look at this. Black masses, mutilations. The incubus, the succubus. I'm telling you, Walter was a human sacrifice.
I should have gone to the lake. I should have listened to Carol.
Listen to your wife. Who listens to their wife? Listen, you got to listen to me. You know what the deal is? What we got to do is we got to go down to the religious supply store. We got to get ourselves a couple of gallons of holy water. My cousin Jerry's a priest. He can get us a deal. No, we got to go to the market. We got to get ourselves a couple of those big strings. You know they string that garlic? A couple big strings of garlic. We got to get ourselves some fresh lamb's blood. And then we got to... Ray, do you want him to take your family, kidnap them, tear their livers out, and make some kind of satanic pate? Ray, you're chanting. Ray, look. Ray, unconscious chanting. You're chanting. I want to kill everyone. Satan is good. Satan is our pal. Ray, you're chanting. Hey, once they get in here, it's over, pal.
What's up, everybody? We're the Christopher once again with the heads, not the tails. And right now, we're gonna go on a little ride, so stay tuned.
Ha! They didn't get us. But I wonder, am I related to the dinosaurs too?
Of course. We just have to follow the chain of your great-grandmothers a bit further. To your lizard grandma, who lived 320 million years ago. On the line of relatives, she's 16,000 kilometers. That's 10,000 miles away from you and your mum. About as far as a flight from Europe to Australia. The descendants of your reptile grandma soon split into two groups. One group developed via Grandma Shrew into the mammals. The other line of relatives produced animals like tortoises, snakes, crocodiles, dinosaurs, and birds.
So T-Rex is an uncle of mine as well. And we share common great-grandmas and also great-grandpas.
Yes, for millions of years you had common ancestors. In fact, you're more closely related to T-Rex than you are to a frog. But even with amphibians like frogs, toads and salamanders, you have common ancestors. Your grandma Amphibia lived about 400 million years ago. To reach her along the chain of ancestors, you'd have to travel 20,000 kilometers, which is halfway around the world. This grandma was a real pioneer because she was one of the first vertebrates that crawled out of the water and colonized the land.
I'm Trey Smith, and in this video, we're going to be going over the science of evolution, and we're going to refresh Mr. Richard Dawkins' memory on some events in just a minute.
Welcome to a fantastic journey into the past. You're going to meet some of your great-great-great-grandparents. Most of them lived many millions of years ago and look totally different from you. You probably never think of them as being part of your family. But it's to them that you owe your life, because if they had never existed, you wouldn't exist either. Have you ever seen your family tree? In a family tree, the youngest children, you and your brothers and sisters, if you have any, are right at the top. Below that, you'll find your parents, who are the children of your grandparents. And your grandmas and grandpas are the children of your great-grandparents. Do you know your great-grandparents? It's quite possible that they're no longer alive, but one thing is certain. Without them, neither your grandmas and grandpas nor your parents would have been born, and you wouldn't be alive either. Perhaps you're wondering what your family tree has to do with a journey into the past. Imagine this. Your mother holds hands with her mother, your grandma. And your grandma holds hands with her mother, your great-grandma. Your great-grandma does the same with her mother, your great-great-grandma, and so on. This forms a human chain made up of your female ancestors. Of course, it's impossible in reality, but I'll bet you can imagine it. If you walk down the chain of your ancestors, each step takes you further back into the past. If you walk 10 meters, that's 33 feet, you'll be standing in front of your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma who lived 200 years ago.
Hello.
If you walk 100 meters along the chain of your great-grandmothers, you'll come to your Roman grandma. We call her that because she lived 2,000 years ago during the Roman Empire.
Was she a rich Roman aristocrat with a fancy villa and swimming pool?
Perhaps. But maybe she was just a poor slave who had to serve her mistress the whole day long. Perhaps she lived outside the Roman Empire in a small village somewhere else.
Or maybe in an Indian settlement in America.
What did your great-great-great-grandmother... We need 99 greats here do. We don't know. But one thing is certain. She gave birth to at least one daughter who later also became a mother, grandmother and great-grandmother.
Or else I wouldn't exist.
Exactly. You've walked 100 meters along your great-grandmother's, but you can walk even further, can't you? If you walk 1 kilometre, that's just over half a mile, you'd need about 10 or 15 minutes to do that on foot. You come to your Stone Age grandma, who lived 20,000 years ago. It was freezing back then. It was the coldest part of the last ice age, so people had to wrap themselves in thick furs. Your Stone Age grandma lived under completely different conditions than you. But just imagine, if she was born today, she'd look no different from anyone else. We'll take a taxi now because it's faster, and we'll drive past your great-grandmother's. After 5 minutes, when we've driven 10 kilometres or 6 miles, we'll pull up for a moment and take a look at the very first grandma who belonged to the same species of humans as you do. Homo sapiens.
Ah, Grandma Sapiens the First.
She lived around 200,000 years ago in Africa.
Hang on. Which one is Grandma Sapiens the First? This one here? Or this one?
Well, how did she differ from her mother, grandmother and great-grandmother, who weren't yet Homo sapiens women, but belonged to the previous human species, Homo erectus?
They all look alike. I can't see any difference.
That's right. And there's a reason for that. Because the transitions between species are gradual. That's why we can't tell exactly which of your great-grandmothers was the last Homo erectus grandma and which was the first Homo sapiens grandma. The differences between the human species only become clear if we let our time taxi take us back further into the past. After 90 kilometres, that's 56 miles, we see one of your early erectus grandmas, who lived 1.8 million years ago. You can clearly see that her eyebrows bulged out more, and she had a smaller skull and a barrel-shaped body.
This grandma looks pretty strange to me.
But that's nothing compared to the strange grandmas you're going to see in a moment. As the taxi drives further, you can tell just by looking out of the window that the arms of your great-grandmothers are getting longer and longer.
And they get much hairier too.
Soon you'll see your first grandmas that had real fur. After about 200 kilometers, we've been driving for 2 hours now, we decide to pull up again for a while. This is a Grandma Australopithecus, who lived almost 4 million years ago.
Oops! She almost looks like a chimpanzee.
Grandma Australopithecus really doesn't give you the feeling that she's human. But from here to the ancestor of the chimpanzees is about an hour's drive further along the line of our great-great-great-great-grandmas. After about 3 hours of driving, we come to Grandma Chimpman, who lived 6 million years ago in Africa.
There are growing numbers of you out there who may be getting a little tired and worn out with the old monkey stories. In fact, taking that a step further, many could easily view stuff like this as disrespectful to even the word science.
We call her that because she was the great-grandmother of chimpanzees, chimp, and humans, man.
So humans and chimpanzees have the same great-grandma?
Yes, and before that, we had the same mothers and fathers, grandmas and grandpas for billions of years. Only since Grandma Chimpman have we gone separate ways. Even if we had a picture from back then, we wouldn't know which of Grandma Chimpman's daughters led to us and which to the chimpanzees. The chain of ancestors running from your mother to Grandma Chimpman is about 300 kilometers. That's 186 miles long. That's roughly the distance from Berlin to Hamburg. If you're good at walking, you could easily walk that distance in a week. And it would take you 1 more week to walk back down the chain of the great-grandmothers of today's chimpanzee.
So as humans, nothing separates us from chimps, except for a chain of related great-grandmas, running from Berlin to Hamburg and all the way back again to Berlin.
It's not much, is it?
Mm-mm.
If we drive along our great-grandma chain for another 50 kilometers, we come to Grandma Gori Chimpman, the common grandmother of humans, chimpanzees and
Gorillas!
Right. She lived 7 million years ago. After 550 kilometers, we've gone back 11 million years into the past, where we meet Grandma Orangilla Chimpman.
This is the common grandmother of humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans.
Exactly. And if you want to get to the delicate little lady that all dry-nosed primates are descended from, we'd need to drive a lot further.
The common grandma of all higher primates?
All dry-nosed primates. That means all the great apes, including humans, as well as gibbons, baboons, macaques, capuchin monkeys, and tarsiers.
They're really cute.
Grandma Drynose lived about 60 million years ago. Do you want to meet her? If we keep to our old scale, where 5 meters along the chain of our ancestors equals 100 years, then you'd need to go 3,000 kilometers, which would take 2 days by car and 2 months on foot. The next stop on our journey into the past won't be until we've reached 10,000 kilometers, over 6,200 miles.
That's like flying from Europe to Brazil.
That takes us back 200 million years ago. In those days, there lived an insignificant little animal that looked a bit like a modern shrew. It's hard to believe, but it's true. From that little Grandma Shrew are descended all mammals alive on the earth today. She was the great-grandmother of all hedgehogs, rabbits, mice, cats, dogs, horses, pigs, elephants, and monkeys.
And of us humans too.
Of course.
And of all the whales.
Yes, of all mammals that have ever lived on this earth. But 200 million years ago, you would hardly have predicted that, because back then, quite different animals were running the show. The first dinosaurs, who later developed into gigantic monsters.
My little great-grandmas and great-grandpas were good at hiding from them, I bet.
Yes, definitely. If none of them had survived, you wouldn't exist.
From my point of view, I'm actually very thrilled that they got this Planet of the Apes Monkey Man idol out just under the whistle, and in time to slip its way in to Fossils of Dragons, which should be out about a week after Jurassic, where we are going to go through pre-flood stuff and after the flood stuff, the hardcore stuff that when you look at it, you say, that should not be. And of course, entities. And I'm asking, be patient. Let me get it right. Without further ado, let's dive in to the science of evolution right about now. Now, I had the opportunity to call Glenn, which shouldn't take much work on your end to investigate if you're truly interested on who he is and the background behind his journalism. He was largely responsible, the most probably responsible, for all of the articles out there that are pumping out left, right, and center, and even parroted right on to this day, that would insult, demean, and damage anyone that would suggest that the dinosaur human footprints were real.
This is the famous Taylor Trail, perhaps the most renowned trail of alleged human tracks and promoted. But then there are many of these elongated tracks that were mistaken by many locals and creationists, especially years ago, for human tracks or giant man tracks, as they sometimes call them. This was a very famous set of tracks here because you had an alleged human track overlapping a deep and obvious three-toed dinosaur track. Ironically, there was an accusation made that I may have destroyed this track. Well, it's not destroyed. There's no human track to destroy. It's a dinosaur track.
And this man, Glenn, is apparently largely retired now from the vigorous defense of the peripheral problems surrounding the Planet of the Apes world theories. He did have advertisements that he did paintings and artwork for commissions, which was the context of the phone call. Richard Dawkins, BBC documentary buddy, on the issue of getting rid of this pesky problem of the dinosaur human footprints. Richard, I hate to bring this up, but I think this is probably the part of the video where you grip onto your chair a little bit tighter, man. I was trying to get Glenn. Yeah, Glenn. This is my name's Trey. Do you have a few minutes, or did I catch you at an okay time?
I can talk.
I wanted to. Honestly, I wanted to talk to you about two things. I wanted to see if I could if you had time to maybe look at a couple of drawing ideas that I had that I was looking for somebody to do, if you're still doing that kind of thing.
Well, what do you have in mind exactly?
A couple of things dealing with dinosaurs, actually.
For an article or book? Or...
Around here lies one of the most important collections of dinosaur footprints ever found. And it's also the site of a delightfully absurd shaggy dinosaur story, dreamed up by a powerful cabal of scientific creationists, hell-bent on finding evidence for the biblical story of the origin of life.
Or if you could consider it.
I'd like to hear more about it, you know, what exactly you want drawn, and so tell me more about it.
Well, let me ask you that, did you used to do the presentations about the dinosaur footprints, didn't you, in Glen Rose years and years back?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've been studying the tracks there for over 30 years. And
Yet 100 million years ago, all this was a tropical, muddy swamp, seething with dinosaurs. The footprints they made were covered in sediment and fossilized. Now time has revealed them through erosion.
Did you ever get to meet? Have you ever met Richard Dawkins?
oh yeah, many years ago he came down with the BBC to film the Biloxi tracks and you know, do a little piece on the controversy about the human footprints. And so he interviewed and filmed me and Ron Hastings and did a little piece on us there. So that was, I'm trying to think, probably 25 years ago, maybe. Something like that.
Well, I tell you what. So that was 25 years ago. That time flies by.
In the 1980s, probably, when he came down. I first published my longer article in the early and mid 1980s, and I believe he came down, you know, shortly afterwards. So it might have been 85, 87.
So you knew Richard. Dawkins.
He never did find any man tracks, but couldn't resist mentioning the Glen Rose man print myth in the scientific write-up of this monumental find. To his horror, the creationists took it seriously, and the dinosaur farce is still running here 40 years later.
Well, you did some. It's really nice that Richard was, involved in that kind of stuff. You did some of the. I had looked at your stuff and the presentations that you put together, arguing against those footprints being young. Those were those were bar none the most stellar presentations on the topic that I can find.
I appreciate that. I put a lot of time and work into it, and like I said, I've been for many years working on a full-length book on the subject. It's just going very slow and keeps getting longer. I should put them into it probably. But I'm pretty much done with all the documentation I intend to do in the Biloxi. Many of the tracks are broken away or badly eroded now, and the Taylor site.
Broken away is an understatement, and absolutely right. Here is just one of the tracks. Here is the human footprint, which is inside of dinosaur steps, human steps. These guys are running from something, apparently. Whatever the case, here's what the footprint looks like before. You've got a string of these. Here's what the footprint looks like before. This is the identical footprint afterwards. And that's rock right there. Whatever happened to these footprints had to happen so viciously that it changed that to that. But to me, that's amazing that to even think about that you're working with figures like Richard. I respect him more than I could possibly express. I wanted to talk to. Yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting. At that time, my own views are kind of still evolving, and even though I had kind of spearheaded the refutation of the human footprints there, I was not that long out of college and still, refining my own views. And, for a while I was kind of buying into some of the creation stuff, and then soon realized the earth was very old, and then also, before too long, came to fully accept evolution and the rest of it.
Yeah.
When Richard came down, I remember I was still a little on the side about some things, so we had some spirited discussion about all that, but we were in total agreement about the footprints, because, I had, that was kind of the gist of my work that you're refuting with the footprints. So actually, I could go.
Refuting the dinosaur human footprints like it was taken awfully seriously. Now remember, we went from the argument of that the human tracks were carved to our new argument, which would be that you would be stupid to even believe that those were human footprints, because after all, take a look at that. I mean, after all, as Mr. Dawkins would so aptly say, who could possibly believe, looking at that kind of thing, that it was actually a human footprint?
But most tracks aren't that clear-cut. Time has eroded them. Sediment has filled some in. You wouldn't think anyone in their right mind would mistake these for man tracks, yet this is exactly what's happened. Glenn Cuban on the left and Ronnie Hastings are two independent researchers who spent several years trying to convince the gullible that there's a less exotic explanation for the variability in these tracks.
Two tracks that are slightly raised, like the dinosaur footprints, but you can see that they match on either side, but the one on the right looks like something stepped in the back of it, doesn't it? And it's depressed, it's not raised. We'll see there is that duck-shaped dinosaur track that matches the one next to it perfectly, but again, the depressed track within it is just perfect. And if we had enough dark, you could actually count the knuckles and the toes here. And that's in a sequence of 15 in a right-left pattern. Okay, you want some more evidence? It just keeps piling up, and they keep evading.
We discovered that the Eye of Faith can see almost anything it likes in the bed of the Paluxy River. The creationists were fooled by a pathetically small resemblance to a human foot. The random forces of physics, erosion, has worked on the rock to produce such varied shapes that the Eye of Faith and imagination can see almost anything. A religious quest that is as alive today as it was in the early days of opposition to Darwin himself. Because people cannot come to terms with evolution, the blind designer, making all the diversity and complexity of life that they prefer to believe was created by God.
Ha! They didn't get us. But I wonder, am I related to the dinosaurs too?
Of course. We just have to follow the chain of your great-grandmothers a bit further. To your lizard grandma, who lived 320 million years ago. On the line of relatives, she's 16,000 kilometers. That's 10,000 miles away from you and your mum. About as far as a flight from Europe to Australia. The descendants of your reptile grandma soon split into two groups. One group developed via Grandma Shrew into the mammals. The other line of relatives produced animals like tortoises, snakes, crocodiles, dinosaurs, and birds.
So T-Rex is an uncle of mine as well. And we share common great-grandmas and also great-grandpas.
Yes, for millions of years you had common ancestors. In fact, you're more closely related to T-Rex than you are to a frog. But even with amphibians like frogs, toads and salamanders, you have common ancestors. Your grandma Amphibia lived about 400 million years ago. To reach her along the chain of ancestors, you'd have to travel 20,000 kilometers, which is halfway around the world. This grandma was a real pioneer, because she was one of the first vertebrates that crawled out of the water and colonized the land.
As well as the background and story researched about the smashing of the dinosaur human footprints in Glen Rose, Texas.
She probably did what many amphibians do today. She started out as a larva, living like a fish in water.
And then she turned into a land animal and used a lung to breathe with instead of gills.
Grandma Amphibia lived in two different habitats. The world of aquatic animals and the world of land animals. I suppose you can already guess what animal's grandma amphibia is descended from.
Sure. Fish.
Right. For 70 million years, our great-grandmothers swam through the oceans as fish. If you went along the chain of ancestors, you'd see nothing but fish for over 3,500 kilometers. Your first grandma fishmouth lived 470 million years ago.
Grandma Fishmouth?
Before that, your grannies were invertebrate animals like sponges or ringed worms.
Grandma Spongehead?
Presumably, Grandma Spongehead, 600 million years ago, was the mother of all animals that exist today. Not just fish, amphibians, reptiles and mammals, but also snails, worms, spiders, insects and crabs. So in your extended family, your big family, there are
a whole lot of creepy crawlies.
Our visit to Grandma Spongehead has taken us back to a time about 600 million years ago. That means we followed the line of your ancestors for about 30,000 kilometers. That's 19,000 miles.
So, is that the end of our journey?
No. Most of your ancestors are still missing. But they were so tiny that you would only be able to observe them with a microscope. They were made up of just one single cell and were neither male nor female. Because they were neither grandmas nor grandpas, we're going to call them grandmapas.
Grandmapa?
Yes, grandmapa bacteria.
So I am related to bacteria as well?
Yes, but only very, very distantly. The very first grandmapa bacteria arose more than 3,500 million years ago. To get to her, you'd have to travel 175,000 kilometers. That's 110,000 miles, which is like flying right around the world more than 4 times. From her are descended all bacteria, all plants, all fungi, and all animals that ever lived. All life forms that live on Earth have developed out of her offspring. That sounds like a miracle, but it isn't. We call it
evolution.
Now, Richard, I just want to make sure that I understand you clearly there. Now, evolution, that is your pronunciation of the word.
As it was in the early days of opposition to Darwin himself. Because people cannot come to terms with evolution.
And I humbly point this out, sir, because atheism, which you are currently sort of the head of, or Darwinism, Lamarckism, all these other little isms, get real stickler about definitions. In my opinion, that's usually to dodge the substance and get caught up in the definitions. For example, I say monkey, they say ape, I say tomato, you say tomato. But on this particular word here that you're stating, the evolution, which you are upset that more people aren't converting to fast enough. The actual definition of this word that you're saying, evolution, so this word, Lucian, that you're telling me you believe in, this is a bright or shining lizard, serpent, or reptilian creature, or some type of entity. I guess I'm not terribly surprised. This theory behind the evolution is sort of the reverse of reality, isn't it? It's stating that things over time self-organize and just get better and better and self-construct all by themselves. Really is the order from chaos themology at its heart, its base, its very foundation. It's like an episode of The Twilight Zone. It's the exact opposite. Everything here from the cells to the stars. Pretty much the only exception to that rule in a construct that's non-random, mind you, is when you're dealing with actual genetic, tit-for-tat, line-for-line, digital software, which ultimately declines too. It opens up just like a zip file and then starts its slow decline. In one individual's life or collectively, you can actually measure the mutation rate all the way back to the beginning. But everything here, from little tiny cells to the stars in the heavens above, on its timeline, is in fact deteriorating over time, which is exactly the reverse of the entire theory, even without the monkeys. I want to compare apples to apples, make sure we're talking about the identical same thing. To be precise, with no loss of translation between the two of us about exactly what you're talking about and exactly what you're selling me on, this evil yet shining reptile, which has the whole carnival of plastic monkey idols that I'm to come to my knees and bow to, apparently. Now, respectfully, in your defenses of Evilucion, there in your documentary, Richard, during the times where you're insulting, belittling, demeaning, and just outright mocking at anyone who would look at those footprints that you were saying were erosion and cracks in the earth, you didn't actually show any of the footprints, did you, Mr. Dawkins? Now, it can almost seem like within the context of that particular documentary, and I don't want to be quick to judge, I want to look more, that old Evilucion had you out on a filthy, well, that's probably not the right word, a bit of a deceptive piece of business. I think, Mr. Dawkins, you would have a terribly difficult time convincing me with a straight face, eye to eye, that while you were there, that you yourself didn't look at the footprints, the very ones I was showing on the screen. However, you did seem to very clearly acknowledge, which I'll play in a second here, that Evilucion and all of his circus of plastic monkey idols would have to pack his bags and hit the hills if just one of now 80 human footprints with the dinosaur footprints was real, and would certainly sort of maybe appear that you knew about that problem way back 25 years ago when you were out there with Glenn Kuban and you were making a documentary insulting others whilst not showing the evidence that you were insulting. Correct, sir?
Because people cannot come to terms with evolution. They believe the man prints prove Darwin wrong because they show that man and dinosaurs coexisted. Whereas if we evolutionists are right, at least 60 million years separated the last dinosaur from the first human being.
It does sort of seem like the boys down, at least at the Dallas Police Department, not including all of the other evidence, weren't ready, I guess. They didn't get down on their hands and knees to bow to the monkey. As you say, everyone in science must do, to bend over, no pun intended, to the old great god nothing, Evilucion, who you market so well.
The measly, piddling little ideas that are in Genesis, there's got to be something wrong with them. So you've either got to be staggeringly ignorant, which most of them are, or if you're not ignorant, you've got to be insane. I mean, it's really a really appalling stranglehold that these archaic beliefs have on minds that have been warped since childhood. We have a history of 4 billion years of slow, gradual evolution. Just think about 4 billion years, that we are the heirs of 4 billion years of maybe 3.5 billion years of evolution, and that...
Thank you, Satan. Would appear that not terribly long after the Dawkins documentary, when the footprints seem to still be in pristine shape. The evidence that those human and dinosaur footprints together were real was certainly growing more and more significant in the evidence at that point. These are images of the Dallas Crime Lab guys out there investigating the footprints. Their conclusion was that these were authentic human footprints. So Rich, before we get back to Glenn, you are telling me, in a nutshell, that you are rock solid, hardcore, dead set, fully invested in the Planet of the Apes world, monkey people thing. You would be best described perhaps as Charles Darwin's biggest cheerleader, the #1 fan in the Charles Darwin fan club. You've got all of your eggs buried in that basket. Your finances, your funding, and your entire career. I got you, man. I'm following you. I see exactly where you're at. Let me ask you this, Rich. Do you have any last words, any last nuggets of Dawkins-style wisdom to lay on us before we get back to Glenn? Anything else to squeeze out of there?
I despise people who believe something without evidence and then go out and take action which damages other people.
There was a report that Glenn, the man who I am on the phone with, had been seen going into the Glen Rose track area with a pipe and breaking up the footprints before hightailing it out of there. Plane tickets, which Glenn appears not to deny, show that he flew in on the day it occurred and then quickly flew back out. This is what the footprints look like before. This is after.
Going in many different directions. But anyway, I always have time for, interesting projects. So, I'd be interested in hearing more about what you're up to.
Well, and that's a good. I tell you what, it's an honor to be on a phone with a man that interacted with Richard Dawkins and did the most thorough presentations arguing against the footprints. I've got some cash. You laid on me how much it would cost. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get a large painting with like a big demon. And so a big demon.
I didn't get the last piece. A large painting with what?
Well, it's got a big. Well, hear me out. You're gonna like the rest of the painting. It's got a big. Okay, so it would have. This is only one of the paintings, but it's got a very large demon in the background, and it's got the footprints underneath.
You say a demon, like a devil you're talking about.
Yeah, this would be. But this is funny. I think you're gonna like it. You've got a demon in the background, and then you've got the footprints that are underneath. So those footprints there at Glen Rose, right there in front of the demon, is you, Glenn, holding an iron pipe and bashing the footprints so that no one can see the human footprints with the dinosaur footprint. No, I'll pay you for the painting. Will you do it? I'll pay you well. I'll get you. You tell me how much you need. So this would be a demon in the background, and you viciously coming at the footprints with an iron pipe and smashing them up, and you can be frothing at the mouth or however you want to do it, Glenn. You can even put Richard popping out from the side of you if you want. Do you want to do it? I'll pay you. I'll pay you good for it.
I feel like it looks at old comedy record. Who is this really? I don't really.
No. I'll pay. Listen, I'll pay you very well for it.
Obviously, you read across the rumors about me just doing it for
Glenn, I've seen the before and after shots, man. I'm telling you. Listen, Glenn. I've seen your drawings. You do good work. Look, you destroyed the footprints.
I'm still really confused what this is all about.
But no, this is what it's about, man. I told you at the opener of the call. I'm looking for some artwork done, and I could think of nobody better than you to draw the image. You're doing artistry. I'll pay you for it. I'll get you the cash immediately. Draw a picture.
Yeah, I don't really know this all about. Anyway, whoever this is, the track that he was talking about is still there. Doesn't even look that different.
Glenn, that's a heck of a slip, my friend. That they don't look all that different. Yes, Glenn, they look very, very different. Here's the before and here's the after, Glenn. That is an enormous difference. And more than that, the argument has actually become, since it went from this to this, the Darwinist argument is, what idiot would believe that's a human footprint? Glenn, that's what that footprint looked like. Men spent decades, hundreds of men, doctors spent decades excavating out there. And then one single day, footprints went from this to this. And the very men who had invested their lives, their monies, their labors, and their efforts in that site, in diligently documenting it, were changed like that. And in the fight for what? Guys like Richard Dawkins, who you say set you straight. Thanks, Richard. How many people have you set straight? But in the grand fight for guys like this, and the faith in a monkey world,
Trey, what's your last name?
You know, Glenn, I think that you're going to figure out who I am. But I'll tell you this, man. I love you. I love you dearly.
Your voice sounds familiar, but I can't quite.
Yeah, I know. I get that. You know, Glenn, I get that so much. And you know, those tracks look familiar too. Until you were out there with that pipe going to work on them. I'm telling you, Glenn. I'll pay you. Look, man. Look, Glenn. Glenn, listen, you hung out with Richard Dawkins, you destroyed some dinosaur tracks, you used to give the presentations on them. I'm asking you sincerely, give me a number, Glenn. Tell me how much it costs for you to draw yourself, breaking the footprints, breaking the evidence. I think it would be funny for you to draw up a picture of yourself hitting the prints. Well, I want to hang it on my wall. I want a picture. The story is so classical. I can imagine you out there, you got the pipe, and you're smashing that thing, and make it a happy demon, and Richard popping out from the side. $500 for a painting of you, Glenn.
I do some commission hours sometimes, but I don't think I.
So you won't draw yourself destroying the foot. Glenn, it would be funny. I think it would be fun. Look, it happened 25 years ago. I mean, everybody would get a. I'd send a copy to Richard. Richard would laugh about it. Richard would laugh his fool head off because 25 years ago, and here you are, and you smash. I mean, you guys hung out together, and you're out there, and you smash. I mean, I think he would get a kick out of that. I think he would get a real kick out of that. You know, everybody, look, it's water under the bridge. I tell you what, Glenn, you've got my phone number, and you call me back if you want to draw the painting of yourself back when you used to hang out with Richard, depicting in full detail merely the simple scene of the destroying of the footprints. I will honestly pay you if you'll do the drawing. I love you, man. God bless you. God bless you, Glenn. A lot of people have actually done a lot of prayer and shed a lot of tears, big tears, and that's true, Glenn. Over not because of whatever may have happened, and I make no judgment. What may or may not have precisely occurred the day the footprints changed, Lord only knows. In my life, making no judgment on that end, I've certainly made my fair share of decisions that I look back on and just say, wow. But I know this, that there have been a lot of tears, big tears, from people that I know well that love the Lord a lot. Glenn, I don't know you, but long story short, I think you're a good man. I think you are a really good man. They got caught up a long time ago with a really slippery crowd. There's a full write-up on this one over at godinanutshell.com. It was up within 2 days of them putting the Monkey Man out. Look, we're not in the 1850s anymore. So my question to you on the other side of the screen, why are we using science in universities? No less, we're using monkey men at universities. Why are we using conspiracy theories from the 1850s, no less, and calling it science? Charles Darwin, this little guy right here, he was a 22-year-old that got on a boat with a degree from Cambridge in theology, no degree in any science whatsoever. Family's trying to figure out something to do with him. They stick him on the HMS Beagle, Her Majesty's ship, trying to find, what are you going to do? He's got a degree in theology, zero science. That's what he's got. You got a guy with a degree in religion trying to teach you about science. And the geological column that they use as evidence for the evolution was written by his pal, Charles Lyell. Darwin's friend, the hardcore Lamarckist attorney, Charles Lyell, who made a career in Darwinism geology. And what an enormous shock that I love Lamarck Lyell over here and his 150-year-old drawings pumped into all of the textbooks, even right now till this day, doesn't exist anywhere in actual reality. When you're living in an hour, when you can look at the genetics which make a plastic monkey man an impossibility. This dead monkey skull right here on the screen that this man here has his lips smooched up as tight as you can get to. This is their new claimed missing lynx skull, for which they did their modeling and recreations to come out with this. It's a dead monkey's head. It's a pretty basic monkey skull, just like many monkey skulls that you could find in Africa, no less. And through the eyes of this missing lynx founder, it's not his first rodeo. He seems to see a monkey becoming a person in every African set of dead monkey bones that he finds. In this particular episode, we've got them drawn throwing each other into caves. I've got two things to say about this right here. Number one, it's a little embarrassing, but number two, come on, Lee. Get your mouth off the dead monkey. You don't know where that thing's been. Romans 1:25. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped the creature rather than the Creator. If we couldn't consider that prophecy fulfilled, I don't know what would be. Look, I'm not out to offend. If you're into 150-year-old writings, old Purple Haze Darwin, I Got Dark Secrets, he's not going anywhere. And it's a free country, Mr. President. But I am humbly submitting to your hands that the answers, the real answers, on all scopes and all fronts are much larger, far more colorful, far more fascinating than any Charles Darwin lunchbox. And thank God for that. There are three questions, from my view, that are worthy of your attention. The three most important questions, the three questions that matter most. Who am I? Where did I come from? What happens next? These are the same three questions that one would ask if they woke up in a ditch. And most people live their entire lives distracted and entertained out of ever looking at the most intellectually satisfying questions of all human existence. If you're looking for grant-funded monkey stories, I don't do that. That's what the grant-funded government guys are there for. These are all the strongest documentaries that I've made to date. And in Jurassic, through the lens and scope of the dinosaurs, I felt it was important, critical, to lay out for you the data, not to tell you my opinions, but point by point by point, data after data after data, empirical evidence coming from every possible side, dealing with the 1859 theory of the guy on the boat. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button at the bottom of your screen. There's much more to come. Each thing seemingly larger than the last. I'm Trey Smith, and I hold my case that true science is merely the study of how God does business. God bless every last one of you on the other side of the screen. These are the complete lineup of videos to come right off of the God in a Nutshell Facebook or Trey Smith Facebook page, also on godinanutshell.com. Go over there and hit like, and you'll know when each one becomes available. There is no dinosaur video on the face of this planet Earth like that video.
Folks, believe it or not, that was sent to me from somebody that was going against my last video on evolution with Kent Hovind. And somebody sent me the link to that Evo Kids video as their proof, because I asked for them to show me proof that their evolution was real, and that's the video they sent me. I thought I'd share it with you, and I thought I'd put it on blast using Trey Smith. So God bless each and every one of you out there. I love all of y'all's, and I thank you for subscribing, and steer clear of these great deceptions. Keep your kids away from it. I don't know what to say. It just blew my mind when I watched that video, y'all. So God bless each and every one of you. Remember, you're the heads, not the tails. You're more than conquerors. And if God could use me, He could use you too. In Jesus' precious name. Amen.